Well, thank you so much, Natalie. I appreciate you guys hosting us. We are going to be presenting the Be Your Own Best Advocate presentation for you. Dr. Karen, Julia, and I all run organizations for rare disease and chronic illness. So today we're just going to talk to you about how you can be your best advocate. You must not be praying hard enough.
You must not be doing something right if you are still sick.
You don't make cortisol. You must never get stressed.
That's way too rare. There's no way you have that.
Just lose weight and you'll be just fine.
But you don't look sick. I don't understand.
So these are some quotes that a lot of us in the chronically ill community have heard, and anybody who really faces health issues. So today we're going to be talking about defining chronic illness, what it is exactly. We're going to be sharing our stories, what our organizations do, and we're going to help you form an agenda and a plan of action to help you be an advocate, not only for your own health, but in everything in your life.
All right, so first we're going to start out with defining some terms so we can set the stage for our stories and our respective organization missions. So chronic illness, according to the CDC, is defined broadly as conditions that last 1 year or more and require ongoing medical attention or limit activities of daily living or both. And as Winslow and Dr. Karen have and will mention, we all three of us have chronic and rare diseases, and we'll be telling you about our story shortly. And then self-advocacy is defined as the action of representing oneself or one's views or interests. And we're excited to share with you today how our experiences have resulted in our own self-advocacy and how you might be able to apply them to your life as well.
So what is adrenal disease? Well, it most definitely is a balancing act. It is an abnormality in cortisol, and there are two ends of a spectrum. You can either make too little cortisol or too much cortisol. In my experience, I have experienced both sides of the pendulum, and I would really like to explain to you why I am here today and what my story is. My name is Dr. Karen, and I survived in a rare life-threatening illness called Cushing's disease, which falls under the category of Cushing's syndrome. Cushing's disease is defined by excess cortisol in the body. It impacts about 3 of every 1 million people. If left untreated, it can lead to death. And the zebra symbol is considered a symbol of being rare in the medical patient community. Doctors say that Cushing's is rare. As a result of treatment, and my story is a long one, so I'm going to give you the short version. I had brain surgery in 2011, and ultimately after recurrence of Cushing's, I had a bilateral adrenalectomy, which means that I had both of my adrenal glands removed as a last resort treatment. Ironically, as a result of treatment, I went from one end of the spectrum to the other. I went from having Cushing's disease caused by a pit tumor that caused too much cortisol to producing no cortisol in my body at all. Adrenal insufficiency is what I currently have, and it's defined as inadequate production of cortisol in the body. So now I am left being steroid dependent for life. And because cortisol is your stress hormone, your fight or flight hormone, it helps you compensate for trauma or stress, emotional or physical. Stress can literally kill. So my life changed in the blink of an eye, and that led me to my life's purpose. You see, I turned my adversity into an opportunity to give back and to walk in what I believe is my purpose in life. And I founded the EPIC Foundation after recovery in 2016. I am the founder and executive director of the EPIC Foundation. And professionally, my background is as a licensed clinical psychologist since 2005. And so I've taken my skill set as well as my personal journey, and I've used it to serve the chronic illness community. What we do is, I'm sorry, I prematurely went to the next slide. I'm going to back up here. What we do is we support and people in the chronic illness community and provide advocacy for people living with invisible chronic illness. The EPIC Foundation stands for Empowering People with Invisible Chronic Illness. We focus on emotional wellness, and we focus on achieving optimal mental health. We empower our patients and caregivers to thrive.
So thank you, Dr. Karen, for sharing your story. And like Dr. Karen, I have also adrenal disease, but I have a different form. I have what's called primary Addison's disease. So unlike Dr. Karen, where she had too much cortisol caused by the pituitary tumor, I had what's called an autoimmune destruction of my adrenal glands. So basically my adrenals just decided that they were not going to work anymore, and it was because my own body attacked it. So now I am left being steroid dependent. It is my belief that because of my congenital disorder, medullary sponge kidney, that my body was so physically taxed that it just autoimmune destructed my adrenal. So that's my form of adrenal disease. But like I said, it leaves me with deficiencies in cortisol, aldosterone, and DHEA. So I am also steroid dependent for life. Just to give you a little snippet of my story, it's long as well, so I'll shorten it. I was in the field of geriatrics. I wanted to be a physician's assistant. I worked in Alzheimer's and dementia, and medicine was pretty much my whole life. I love the medical field. And I went from being a full-time student and working in geriatrics, running a retirement home, to not being able to get out of bed. And it was because with steroids, obviously with Addison's disease, you have to replace cortisol, which is steroid medications. And because of my congenital kidney disorder, I was not absorbing the steroid tablets. And so I was having to take them every 90 minutes just to survive, and my quality of life was terrible. I was all of a sudden unable to get out of bed. So I discovered Professor Hindmarsh's invention of the cortisol pump, which is basically where you take an insulin pump, and instead of filling it with insulin, you fill it with the liquid version of cortisol, which is Solu-Cortef. So I spent the next 2 years trying to get to this treatment, which is not really done. And now that's what my nonprofit organization does. Basically, Adrenal Alternatives Foundation was founded to help people get to this treatment. It is a life-changing treatment, and it is the reason that I'm still alive. So that's the main thing that we do. With Adrenal Alternatives, we also educate people on cortisol deficiency, adrenal diseases, and we offer adrenal dysfunction support to all forms of adrenal disease. So like Dr. Karen, my greatest pain led me to my greatest purpose. And we basically just help people find quality of life.
Thank you, Dr. Karen, and thank you, Winslow. So my name is Julia Anthony, and like Dr. Karen and Winslow, I also have adrenal insufficiency, but there's a third flavor of it. Actually, there's lots of versions of it, if you will. What I have is called congenital adrenal hyperplasia. It's an inherited condition, so I was born with this. I'm deficient in cortisol, just like Dr. Karen and Winslow. I'm also deficient in aldosterone, so that means that I have electrolyte imbalances and have trouble holding on to sodium, which can make life very interesting. I'm sodium steroid dependent for the rest of my life, just like Winslow and Dr. Karen, and I am at risk for an adrenal crisis, which all three of us are at risk for. Because of this risk for adrenal crisis, I have decided to found what is called Solution Medical. Anyone who has adrenal insufficiency is supposed to carry one of these. It's called Solu-Cortef. And this is the life-saving medication required that needs to be injected into the body if someone has one of these crises. It turns out my brother was also born with this condition. We both were unlucky Punnett Square recipients. And just last summer, when he was living in New York City, he had a crisis. He had his kit with him, but he was unable to receive help because it takes an average of 15 steps to mix or reconstitute our life-saving medication and inject it. So what we're doing with our new medical device is we're simplifying adrenal crisis health management by allowing people to have an auto injector for their life-saving medication to replace this. We're also working to unify the adrenal disease community like we're doing today. We have affiliations with Adrenal Alternatives, the Epic Foundation, and other nonprofit organizations in the adrenal disease space. And I think something that is very important is that we're also promoting self-advocacy and working to destigmatize challenges faced by people in the adrenal disease community. Not only lack of awareness, but also just stigma around hormones and cortisol. Hormones and cortisol don't just make us fat. They don't just make us stressed. They don't just make us want a Snickers bar when we're not feeling well or we're moody. They are life-sustaining hormones, and they're very critical to leading a comfortable and healthy life.
Thank you so much, Winslow and Julia, for sharing your stories. We are so grateful to be able to share our stories with you today. Did I see a hand raised? Was that a hand raised symbol?
No, it was not a hand raise. I was clapping for everyone. And then when my sister said I also have CAH, I put a peace sign up because I'm here too.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for that. I didn't know if that was a hand raise, but that is an awesome wave. So now that you've heard all of our stories, we would like to share with you an action plan. How do you become your own best advocate? I think we start out by saying the quote by Oprah Winfrey. You see, we all advocate for others in the chronic illness community and for adrenal survivors. And what Oprah says is, I know for sure the best way to care for others is to first care for yourself. I know that some of you out there do take your pain and turn it into your purpose, and you do help other people in the community. But what we'd first like to share with you is the fact that you must put on your oxygen mask on first. You must take care of yourself first in order to help others.
Exactly. And like Dr. Karen said, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So the first thing that you need to do to be your own best advocate is understand that you deserve the best care. I know that those of us that are chronically ill and those of us that have, different productivity and things like that, we tend to get in the mindset that because we have a deficit, because we do have extra challenges that some other person might not have, that we don't deserve things because we have to struggle more, or we might not be able to work a full-time job or things like that. And I just wanted to encourage everyone that's watching this that your worth is not determined by your productivity. It's not determined by a number on a scale. It's not determined by anything other than who you are as a person, how you treat other people. That is what really matters. So don't go into any doctor's appointment, any interaction with another human, even your self-talk, thinking that you're not worthy of the best care possible. You are worthy of a great quality of life, no matter what challenges that you may face. Also, don't be afraid to fire a doctor who isn't helping you. Fortunately, healthcare is accessible, and we have access to many healthcare opportunities. And so if there's a physician that's really not giving you the best care, then it's okay to say, you know what, that physician's not working for me, that nurse isn't working for me, I don't like the communication within the medical office. It's okay to fire those physicians and to find a team that works for you. It's about your quality of life. Also, a big piece of advice is to keep copies of your own records. You can get them on a CD, you can get physical paper copies, you can even access them on your MyChart app or any electronic app that you can access with your physician. But it's important to have access to your copies. Your healthcare record is your diary, it is your journal, it is your life within these pages. And so if you go into a situation where you need critical care or something, like that happens, or you find a new physician, it's important that you have access to these things on your own person. It's important that you are in control of your own medical record. And it's also important to keep track of your own personal symptoms. We at the foundation have a book that we have published that keeps a 365-day journal of everything that you go through, because your disease, your health, your life is impacted by more than just your physical genetics. It's impacted by environmental factors. It's impacted by the socialization that you have. It's impacted by the food you eat. And so it's very important to track all these pieces of your life so that you can create a better picture of health. If you don't have all your puzzle pieces together, you're not going to understand For example, if you eat something different and it causes different reactions and you don't track it, you're not going to realize that there are all these little tiny pieces that can impact your health. So we highly recommend tracking your own symptoms. There are many apps that you can do this virtually, or you can just get a physical piece of paper. And we also have, you know, the thing that the foundation published, the book. So there are many things that you can do. Also, it's important to share your truth. You never know how your story may unlock somebody's prison. You never know how sharing your story might open up doors for someone else. And it's not just about that. It's also important to be honest. If you're not living the best life, if you're struggling with your quality of life, that's not okay. You need to be honest with your physicians, be honest with your family, be honest with your loved ones. Share your truth so that you can live the best life possible. And finally, it's important to research. I'm not saying become obsessed with your disease, which I've been there and done that. I'm a mega nerd, but it's important to research your personal health condition. With Julia and Dr. Karen, they have different forms of adrenal disease. I have never had more cortisol than I needed, I don't think. Being primary Addison's disease, that sounds like a glorious thing, but it's not, and I know that it's not. And I can't, you know, when I talk to Dr. Karen, be ignorant about that and think, oh, well, that sounds like a great thing, because she is now on the other side of it and she understands the adrenal insufficient side. That being said, with Julia too, she has CAH. I can't imagine battling this thing from birth. I was diagnosed at age 22, and I can't imagine that. So it's important to research the disease that you have. It's important to understand your diagnoses, because, you know, like I said, within these different forms of adrenal disease, you know, some of us are salt wasting, some of us are not. You have to understand what you're battling so you can fully fight everything that you need to fight. So like we said, researching is incredibly important.
Sorry, gotta make sure I unmute myself. So to go along with this action plan, we've come up with an acronym to help you remember everything that Winslow just said. So in order to be your own best advocate, you need to use your voice. And what does voice stand for? So the V of voice stands for vocal. Like we have mentioned today, you need to tell people what you have and tell people what you need, ideally before you need it, especially people with adrenal disease. If we start to go into a crisis or have a life-threatening event happen to us, we might not be in a cognitive the right cognitive mindset to be able to advocate for what we need. So make sure that you're vocal and you let people know what you have and what you will need. O is for organized. So like Winslow said, make sure you have copies of your records. Be prepared for your visits. Be prepared with questions. IDs, or excuse me, the I in voice stands for ID medical alert. So use tools to communicate your needs. In the medical and chronic disease communities, there are medical alert bracelets, there's sashes you can put on your seat belts, there's magnets you can put on your cars, and patches you can put on your child's backpack. There's all sorts of tools that you can use to communicate what you have visually to others. The C of voice stands for combat stigma. So we've had some people and our team at Solution Medical have had some very interesting conversations with both clinicians and patients, where the discussions about stigma around hormones have become very interesting. And as I said before, hormones provide life-sustaining regulation. They don't make you fat, although they do affect your weight. They don't make you stressed, although they can cause stress. They can also combat stress. And they don't just make you moody or break out. They are a multifaceted, life-sustaining group of chemicals in your body that are necessary. And it's important to have knowledge and research what they are and why they're important. And lastly, to finish our voice acronym, the E stands for encourage conversation, just like we're doing here. Like anything, I think it's important that people ask questions, but do so respectfully and empathetically in an effort to learn, not in an effort to label or further promote stigma. With that, Dr. Karen, let's take it to the next section and hear about how people might use their voice.
Thank you so much. So yes, we would like to open this up for discussion now. You certainly don't have to raise your hand and discuss with us, but we believe that there is power in your voice, as we've just demonstrated through our acronym. So the first question would be, how might you use your voice to self-advocate in the future? We see that Elsrita has raised her hand. So I'm supposing this works by unmuting yourself, right?
I guess I figured that out. Good afternoon, everyone. My question to you is, what resources or websites or links can you provide for us to, like, that may be good ways to keep track of our medical progress? Or is it easier? And I know that someone mentioned having a book to keep track of it, but is there something electronically, like a tracker or medical tracker, that you can back up to your email, or you can have accessible at all times to print out occasionally? Is there some resources or links or any other things besides the book? If you could send the link to the book, or suggestions to keep track of your be responsible for your own health.
Thank you for that question, Elsrita. I'll jump in here. First of all, at the end of this presentation, we will be providing contact information. And so please feel free to contact any of our organizations, because we not only have resources that we can provide to the community, but the websites themselves, you will find links to various resources that will help you with things, including tracking your own information medically, and that is extremely important. The other thing I want to jump in here and say is the Epic Foundation has a few affiliates. Two of my affiliates are here with me today, and we believe in working together as a community. One of our affiliates at the Epic Foundation is called WANGI, and it's founded by someone named Marie Berry, who is in Australia actually. And WANGI is a health app that is actually an electronic health app. And with this app, you're able to store your medical information. It's completely HIPAA compliant. It's new. It's where we're at right now. Digitally is where we're at. I remember my niece came over before the pandemic, and she was looking through my 15 binders worth of medical records, literal physical binders of medical records, saying, oh my goodness, why do you have all these records? But that's the way it used to be. You know, you used to have to collect all these paper records and walk into the doctor's office, etc. What I like about this particular app is that you can store everything in one place, and it even allows you to communicate with your doctors on certain things. That resource is on our website. So once you are able to write down our contact information for our particular website, you can go to the affiliates tab, and you will find the WANGI link on there. I highly recommend that one. I'm sure the two of you would like to speak to that as well.
Thank you in advance to everyone that's giving the information. I really don't know how to operate this from my phone, so I'm just going to listen. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question.
It looks like someone else had raised their hand.
Oh, there was someone else, yes.
Mary, I think. Mary, do you have a question?
That's me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So being on the other side of it, I'm a nurse practitioner and I work in mental health. So just wanted to mention that it's really important to be your own advocate and to let people know that physicians don't know everything. There's a lot of things, everybody has their niche. There's a lot of things that I know. There's a lot of things that I don't know. And there's a lot of things I do not know about adrenal disease and things like that. So whenever a patient comes in and they have knowledge and they are their own advocate, it's very helpful to me to listen to them, get the advice from them about what they've been through or what they know. And then I can go on off of that. I think it's really important. There's physicians to listen, but it's also important for patients to speak up and say what they know, because sometimes they just sit there and listen and they know more about that particular issue than I do.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would want to share how they might use the VOICE acronym in the future to self-advocate, or stories about advocacy? And we did talk a lot about medical things today, but especially in today's climate, a bipartisan climate, and a variety of other things going on in our world right now. Being your own best advocate and standing up for what you believe in while respecting other people's points of view is incredibly important. So this doesn't, your stories or your thoughts don't have to be medical specific. If anyone else wants to share.
Hello, sister. So I'm Julie Anthony's sister, or brother. I am not her sister. Yeah, so she and I actually collaborate a lot and talk a lot with her solution endeavor, and I think it's amazing. And advocacy is something that she and I have had to learn like very early on. As kids, you don't understand that my tummy hurt isn't like necessarily normal for you, and it could escalate extremely quickly. So we had to quickly adapt. And I think the acronym is amazing. I think it's an extremely effective thing to apply, but I just want to stress that it needs to be intrinsic in you. It can't just be you relying on someone else or hoping that someone else will hear this acronym and digest it. I went to NYU, I go to Columbia currently. We did all of the medical protocols, and I can tell story after story of how my medical experience at both of the institutes have been let down, and they have records of all of my issues. So you can do the legwork and you can do everything that this acronym says and prepare your surroundings and prepare the people that you're going to be with. But at the end of the day, if you're not going to intrinsically live by that acronym, it's not going to work. And so it takes practice. It's a learning curve. It's really thinking about it and maybe overanalyzing yourself a little bit before you're understanding your symptoms and where you're coming from. But I just want to stress that, like, I, for a long time, tried to rely on my mom, who used to be my biggest advocate. She was on the verge of being a bully, like, with it, which I don't recommend you do. Don't be a bully. They're bad people. We all grow and change. She's great now. But definitely don't rely on someone else. You have to be able to rely on yourself for advocacy and for life to really kind of work out, especially when we're all so rare and we're all so different. And at the end of the day, I'm jaded, so I'm sorry for this. I live in New York. People just don't care about you. That's all I wanted to say. I have a lot of stories. I met a lot of you before via Zoom, and I'm an anecdote to Julia, so I could tell story after story after story. But that's all I wanted to say. But it's an awesome acronym. Just make sure you understand it and you live it before you expect others to do so.
Thank you so much for that. You know, that is so very important. And to speak to what you said, there's definitely a learning curve. And I want to stress that it's a constant process. You know, I grew up, to also speak to what Mary said before you, Joe, is that I grew up during a time where I was taught that a doctor's word is bond. That if a doctor tells you something, because of the level of reverence and respect that you have for that profession, you know, you believe everything that they say. And while certainly I've met a lot of great people in the medical profession, just like many of you, I was misdiagnosed for 5 years before I reached a diagnosis and treatment, and was knocking at death's door by that time. So it is extremely important. Also, Winslow and Julia spoke to this as well. What's so amazing about what Julia is doing is that she's taking a 15-step process and, changing the world by changing the process so that more lives are saved. But she spoke to this briefly before. When we are in adrenal crisis, it doesn't just impact the physiological, the physical, it impacts our cognitive presentation and our neurological presentation. And so oftentimes a lack of judgment and or confusion present. And so by that time, it might be too late. You look like you're drunk sometimes, and you can't vocalize what you're going through. And so it's extremely important to follow these steps before you get to the point of crisis. No matter what illness you have, it might be adrenal insufficiency, it might be some type of other autoimmune flare-up of some sort where you're not able to fully vocalize at that particular time what your needs are because of the chaos that's involved. So I think that is a very great point, and it's just a life learning journey.
Well, if I could,
You're still muted.
I
No,
am?
you're not.
No, I'm
We're
not
fighting.
muted.
Okay, I'm muted.
I just wanted to share a couple of things. When Julia was born, of course, I had no idea anything was wrong. And then she was born, and, we embarked on this journey. And it just so happens that the hospital where she was born had a pediatric endocrinologist on staff, which is unheard of. So that was a gift. But he's in his 90s now. He's still one of my dearest friends. And something he taught me within the first days of Julia's diagnosis, he said, "Mrs. Anthony," because he would never call me Michelle, "you make sure that the doctors that you work with respect you as a parent and respect your motherly intuition, because there are so many brilliant, brilliant doctors out there. But they also have to be on your team, and they have to respect you, and you have to be the team together that brings the best care to your child." So to speak to what Winslow said before, his words to me literally was, where if you don't have a doctor that's on board with you and isn't willing to respect you and work with you to care for your child, fire him. Because there's a lot of other brilliant doctors out there that will have that bedside manner to be able to bring your child the best collaborative care. And I've actually applied that. It sounds so simple, but I've applied that to, like, when my parents were ill. I mean, completely independent of my own children, in other medical situations, you have to be respected as an individual, as a knowledgeable person, and you have to be heard. And if that's not the case, that's okay. Just walk away and find someone else, because there's someone else out there who can be that for you, for your child, or, So that was my one thing I think is really important. The other thing that I brought up Julia and Joe in so many ways to self-advocate. But one thing that happens that I think is really important is to have some kind of documentation with you at all times that can describe what your issues are. Because as Dr. Karen pointed out, if you're going downhill fast and you don't have the cognitive ability to explain, if you have enough sense and awareness to be able to hand them a document that says, "I'm adrenal insufficient," just bullet points of main things that they need to know immediately and who to contact, the medical profession really does appreciate it. So that was the other thing I wanted to say.
Thank you so much for that.
We had one other person raise their hand, I think.
Tiffany?
Yeah, and we have about
Tiffany.
Hi. You all hear me?
7 minutes left, so I want to make sure we can hear everybody's thoughts.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, Tiffany, we can hear you.
Okay, I have a question. How do you encourage or influence someone that has a chronic illness to be a better advocate? for themselves. I asked this because I have a family member who was diagnosed with lupus a few years ago, and every year that I see her, I can just tell she's not taking as good of care of herself as she should. And I give her some suggestions on, meditation, healthy foods to eat, because I'm very health conscious. And I know her parents also do the same by giving her like good, healthy advice. But she's taking small steps to be better, but I just don't think it's enough. And recently she got really stressed out and had a serious flare up with her skin. And I mean, and she just doesn't look good. So just any advice you can give myself on just how I can be, I don't know, more supportive, more encouraging, to help her empower herself, to want to be better and do better.
If I can answer that, and then of course, if you ladies have anything else you want to reiterate, I think what Joe said about having that innate will inside of you, I think that's really the first step to wanting to advocate for yourself, because I think that a lot of us that are chronically ill tend to get in this mindset of being defeated. Like, we play life with two hands tied behind our back. And so I definitely think that you as a family member, the most important thing and the first thing that you can do is really provide that support and let them know that yes, they might have lupus, they might have a chronic illness, they might have, whatever that they're dealing with, but they still can have a great life. I think that's really what helped me the most in my own advocacy, because I hit door after door, and, not to go, into major detail, but it's like when you have that innate desire in yourself that you can say, you know what, I'm going to do what it takes to have a good life. I might have to change my eating. I might have to, exercise more, or, whatever that you can do. And exercise and eating, we know, isn't important, but I think we have to get into that mindset that we're worth more care. So as a family member, my recommendation was make sure that they're supported in that. If they want to go on a different diet, or, maybe walk with them or do some meditation or anything like that, be a part of that process and let them know that they're worth it. And Dr. Karen's organization does a lot with mental health. And so if you want to reach out to them, I know that she can definitely point you in some right directions for resources.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Tiffany, and thank you, Winslow. Tiffany, you'll see our website at the end, and as Winslow stated, we have a lot of resources specifically pertaining to emotional and mental health, and there are things that impact one's process. You'll want to meet her where she's at. As hard as it is to watch your loved one, there is a process. And two of the main issues with chronic illness include the stages of loss, so the loss experience, and also trauma. It can be very traumatic for your life to change within the blink of an eye because of a diagnosis. So it's really important to be with them where they're at, to encourage emotional wellness. Because sometimes people are not at the place to accept or receive, as much as you want to help your family member, they might not be in that space. And so I encourage you to visit the website, share all of our websites. There are plenty of resources on how to deal emotionally, and that will in turn affect the physical well-being as well. Thank you for that question. Okay, so thank you everyone for your questions. We just have a couple more things that we'd like to share with you.
And yes, it's just as we previously stated, mental health has a lot to do with physical health and vice versa. So if you've lost hope, there are many resources, like we said, Dr. Karen's organization, and also a great resource is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. There is no reason why you don't deserve a quality of life. There is no reason why you shouldn't be having access to proper help. So if you have lost hope, here's the phone number to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and please don't hesitate to reach out.
So as we end today, and we thank you for joining us, our final thought to you is to never, never, never give up.
I also want to share my thanks for everybody who's joining us today, and thank you for sharing your thoughts and asking your questions. We invite you to please stay in touch. Each of our organizations, as we've mentioned, focuses on slightly different things, but all of us together support advocacy and education, and are committed to people appreciating their self-worth and using their voice to advocate for that. Here is our contact information for each of our organizations, as well as our websites. If you have any further questions or you're interested in what we talked about today and want to continue the conversation, please feel free to reach out. We also will have a handout available summarizing what we talked about today, available if you shoot any of us an email, and we can supply that to you as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. That was fabulous. Really appreciate you taking the time to share today. And thank you again to everyone who came out to join us for this conversation. And we are recording this, so we'll post it on the Science Center's YouTube page, and have that up on the Mentor Cafe Philadelphia website too, if you'd like a recap. So with that, I will stop the recording and end the meeting. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, bye everyone.